Although every decade is important, for us in India, having lost about 200 years of historical time due to colonial rule, every decade matters a great deal more than it does to a developed European or North American country. Many of them since 1973 are content with a 2% GNP growth rate because they are more interested in their ecology and environment, and per capita incomes are adequately high. But for us, every decade is important. The decade of the 90s is particularly important because it is an emotionally charged decade. It is the first managerial challenge, I would suggest, to all top managements and professional managers in India to use this coming decade, from now on, a preview of the decade, plans for the decade, activity during that decade, because it's only in a few people's lifetime that they span 2 centuries. So we have this great opportunity of getting our people in all kinds of organizations, particularly industrial, but also other developmental agencies and in government, to take stock of the century that is ending. And if we start from now on taking that stock, we may be dissatisfied with what we have achieved, and we have 12 more years with which to do something about that. And let's make the record of the decade better so that the century ends better and that posterity doesn't blame this century too much for what it has failed to do. The second major point I would like to place before you is that this next decade belongs more to Indian managers than to any other group in our society. And I'm using this word belong not in an egoistic sense of their complacency or vanity, but rather in the sense of the trust, the responsibility. The expectations of society in this next decade is perhaps largest on any single group, and that is the managerial group. Our administrators and economists, who had a more important role in the 50s, have already played that role quite significantly and with a large measure of success, and that is reflected on the first requirement for economic development, which is the rate of savings in an economy. When we became independent, we were in a very ill-equipped state for economic development, with only 8% of the gross national product available as savings for capital investment. Through various economic policies and their administration, we have been able to raise the rate of savings to an average of 22% of GNP. This is a remarkable achievement for a poor country. And we have not only sustained but raised this rate of savings despite the 2 oil crises of 73 and 79-80. Now, our politicians, administrators and economists no longer hold the center stage. They have a maintenance role. The factor that is holding up our rapid industrial and economic growth now no longer is the ability of the economy to mobilize savings. It is, as you know, the utilization of savings, the serious problem of capital output ratios, the fact that we are not getting an adequate rate of growth. An economy with a 22% rate of savings and the managerial attitudes, humility, dedication and skills of a society like Japan, Korea or Germany, with a 22% rate of savings would probably achieve a 7% per annum real growth rate of gross national product. We have been achieving 3.5 to 4%. That 3% of GNP represents a simple quantitative measure of the managerial challenge that lies ahead of us in the 1990s. I believe that if we really pursued excellence in each and every enterprise, we should be able to approach this 7%. We are settling for more modest targets and congratulating ourselves. 5% growth rate, 5.2% growth rate. We should consider ourselves having failed the challenges of the 90s unless we can demonstrate between now and 2080 in the next 12 years an average growth rate of 6% per annum as a minimum to posterity into the 21st century. Our record of economic and industrial management in the last 30 years, since 1960 or so, has been at best mediocre, bordering on dismal. Let me mention about half a dozen pieces of evidence which shows that our management is poor. The reasonably high savings which have been mobilized with great belt tightening of basically poor people at the cost of malnutrition and neglect to some extent of rural development has been frittered away through a high capital output ratio. There have been self-defeating controls and regulations. A country which is scarce in resources also using them in a most profligate and spendthrift manner, having various kinds of restrictions on capacity utilization, capacity expansion, domestic sales, export sales, pricing, freedom. Thirdly, we have put high investment but underutilized the infrastructure in the country. The role of government in basically allowing rest of industry to invest in manufacturing and services but provide transport, communication, power as an infrastructure, here we have failed. And if we look at the hidden cost of poor infrastructure management, it's an enormous sum. Then we have had losses in the public sector. We could take a very sanguine and optimistic view. As long as that public sector investment was 5,000 crores, we could say that profitability is not important. We are here to command the heights of the economy or to create jobs. But today, everyone in government, in industry, and I'm very glad to see in our trade union movement, is concerned about the fact that 50,000 crores of investment in the public sector cannot make losses, and on this basis, neither the public sector can grow nor the economy can grow. Even in the private sector, the returns are low. The profitability is nothing much to write home about. With a few exceptions here and there, if you look at what is requisite rate of profit for a company really to gear itself to meet the challenges of the 90s, what does that mean? The ability to invest in research and development, modernization, expansion, human resource development, advertising and promotion, creation of brand names, loyalties, public presence. We do not have the capability to allocate out of the sales rupee, after meeting the costs of raw materials, wages and overheads, enough investment in the future. So there are lackluster, low returns in the private sector, and we are taking the shortcut of paying higher dividends and the illusion of issuing bonus shares frequently and undermining the vitality of industry for the long term. There is low quality at high cost, the worst of all worlds that we can imagine. There has been a trend decline in our export market share. Even as a relatively backward commodity exporting country, we had a 2% share of the world trade. The world trade grew at 16% per annum between 46 and 72. We did not participate in this bonanza of world growth. World economy again gave us an opportunity in the oil revenues. We did not adequately participate, and our share is now down to 0.4%, and part of this has to be borne by managerial failures. And now we are caught in a vicious cycle of demand constraint, which is creating difficulty in expansion of capacities, and that in turn creating difficulty in jobs, and therefore purchasing power demand constraint. We still have not broken out of that vicious cycle. This is the past record. Of economic superpowers, the US, USSR, China, the EEP and India. On all objective basis of natural resources, population, these five agglomerations of economies in the world should have been leading. The Japanese have demonstrated to us that you can have a rich country with poor people, and if there are managerial capabilities, there can be a poor country with rich people. In fact, they have become the sixth of these large economies, but with really much less territory, much less natural resources, and relatively less population. So if we set our sights on this kind of a vision how in the 90s we bring India closer to taking its proper place, not in the world of non-alignment, not in the political confabulations of the world. All right, that we have done, but really what matters to the mass of our population, what really will bring them quality of life, our economic place in the Community of Nations, there is a long way to go. It is not possible to make a comprehensive list of all the challenges of the 90s. There are so many. Very often when challenges are mentioned, people mention them in terms of technology, the sunrise, new technologies, the products and so on. But I think here I'd like to focus on managerial challenges. Technology is a part of it. There are many other aspects to it. I have here highlighted a few challenges which I think are critical. The 90s are going to confront us. We can already see the writing on the wall, more internationalization. The belief of the 50s and 60s that you could create a siege economy, insulate yourself from the rest of the world, and develop at your own pace and your own technology has been given up by more centrally planned economies like the Soviet Union and China, and there is no reason to retain that belief in India. In any case, it's a very high cost approach. This internationalization will pose two kinds of challenges, a challenge of opportunities and a challenge of threats. The challenge of opportunities is through export and access to technology. So we need not today worry about a particular technology, this or that technology. If we are alert, if our organizations are equipped with the skills, and if our top managements can remove their myopia, there is plenty of scope in export markets and technology around the world. We have to prove ourselves worthy of these technologies and these export customers. At the same time, there are threats in internationalization, import and technology obsolescence. If we don't take the positive offensive towards export markets and new technologies, imports will come in, and gradually a government will be beleaguered, as indeed it has happened in the UK and the US, between the interests of customers, be they domestic customers or industrial customers, and the interests of local manufacturers, and the benefit cost ratio will gradually shift in favor of getting it from anywhere in the world if it is a better product and if it is cheaper, and through that let some other industry grow in the domestic economy. The second major challenge will come from the more spread of literacy and information, and therefore assertive movements, perhaps even rebellious movements of various kinds. We have tried to delay this challenge as far as possible by going very slow on our literacy campaigns, because every success brings more challenges, and therefore by mismanaging the various mass literacy, adult literacy campaigns, we have been able to keep a dual economy going for a long time, surprisingly long time. And Professor Galbraith came up with even a hypothesis that is known as the accommodation hypothesis. Countries like India are poor because the majority of Indians are used to being poor, and they are quite comfortable with being poor. And that is the reason why this dual economy has even survived so far. But this cannot be now stopped. Whatever we do for various other advantages of consumer product sales, revenues to Doordarshan, political advantages, the television network has extended all over the country. And therefore this is bringing in functional literacy, even if not formal literacy, and access to information awareness. And I think these rebellious and assertive regional and local movements are likely to increase in the 90s. And this again throws up two possibilities. This challenge may become an opportunity, it may become a threat, depending upon how we handle it. This assertion of peoples all over the country, due to their awareness of better standards of living elsewhere, will become a business opportunity if there are positive responses from local, state and central governments, with the help of industry having a program of social responsibility, community activities. We can convert these aspirations into business opportunities. But if the responses of industry and governments are inadequate, these will create more turbulence in the 90s for our business. Now, this has happened in the past, this will happen in the 90s. But the difference will be that in the world market, there is a new category of countries known as NICs, newly industrialized countries. Now, they will not for a long time remain NICs, they will become developed countries with a double advantage of a relatively lower wage cost as well as the technology on a par with the advanced white countries of the world. And therefore, every year's delay that we make in putting the Indian economy on the world map will cost us even more dearly than in the past. The third major challenge is a very positive one: growing per capita income and an immense market potential in the decade of the 90s. If we can improve our trend growth rate even to 5% per annum, we are talking about some very unusual figures to which India is not used in the last 100 years. A 3.2% per annum per capita income growth rate in real terms. Now that's an enormous rate of growth for any economy. Very few economies in the world are experiencing this. And if we recognize that that 3.2% per capita is accompanied by some inequality in distribution, there is 100 million of the population whose per capita income must be growing at 5% per annum or more. So there is a high growth rate with tremendous economic possibilities. But this high per capita income may spend itself in the form of inflation if we are unable to manage our projects in time, if we are unable to expand our capacities, utilize our capacities. The same purchasing power will chase shortages and spend itself in the form of inflation, or part of that purchasing power will be mopped up by better managed industries elsewhere in the world. Because as per capita incomes rise, customers are chasing and shopping around, and they will not stop their shopping within the shores of the country, and they will look around. There is a fourth challenge which may be viewed by different people from different perspectives, but from an overall national point of view, from the citizen or consumer's point of view, it is totally positive, and that is increasing domestic competition. We now have a breed of younger, small, middle-sized companies started by technologically educated entrepreneurs which are beginning to do very well. Some of their attitudes, learning capabilities, modesty, bringing in ideas from Japan or Germany or Austria or Sweden, they are proving that in industry also, old is no longer gold. Celebration of company jubilees and centenaries should not lure us into any sense of complacency. They may not live to see their second jubilee, their second centenary. These celebrations hide a great deal of obsolescence and decline. The only fact we will notice in the next decade is that these declines will be more rapid, their exits will be more rapid. We have given these kinds of organizations too long a lease of life in our economy with relatively incompetent management. There is a new educated, professional, entrepreneurial class which is now doing well and displacing the old in several industries: textiles, cement, fertilizers, and even in newer industries like electronics, where the early entrants have an even less defendable lead. There is a fifth challenge. There are greater social expectations from business, and these demands are coming from a more demanding society and also a more beleaguered society. There are some obvious demands of society and there are some new demands of society. These demands will get more strident, and those who can meet them will be rewarded, and those managements who cannot meet them will less sentimentally put away. What are these expectations of a beleaguered society? I think there is going to be a lot of demand for jobs. We had this earlier. It took a negative form. It took the form of protecting employment which was not economically capable of being protected. It took the form of resisting modernization, new technology, computerization. We have in the last 5 years won those battles. There is a sea change in the industrial relations atmosphere of the country. We have modernized in many cases. We have accepted voluntary retirement schemes. We have brought in computerization. There are some really necessary imports of technology, imports of critical raw materials, investments from abroad coming in and therefore requiring dividend repatriation. For all these reasons, exports are going to be very important. So the demand for exports will come, and people will say, we cannot go back to 1959. Many of us here may remember the second 5-year plan. We cannot have a foreign exchange crisis and therefore cut down the plan, cut down all industrial activities. There is going to be a demand that keep the imports which we need, let's pay for them through exports. I think people will get increasingly impatient with shoddy quality, and competition today gives them alternatives to find better quality. They are also going to demand price stability. They have experienced reasonable price stability over the last 20 years. And I think although we may not have grown in real terms as much as we should, the World Bank has recognized and complimented among all the developing countries, India and China, as two countries which have coped with the ravages of the oil price increase and maintained reasonable price stability, single-digit inflation for a long period of time. But this is now eluding our grasp in the last couple of years. One more drought and we may be in difficulty. We should therefore have in every industry the capacity to build buffers that we have earlier experienced in agriculture, in all other cash crop commodities, even in critical industrial components and spares. The price stability will have to be viewed as a long-term issue. There is also going to be a tremendous demand for service. Because of competition, each and every industry will have to be profitable. Service will be a very big demand. In some industries, this is well known, mean time between failures, the continuous operation of either a data processing system or a computerized process control system. Our employees at various levels are going to demand more quality of work life. We have come a long way from the time when it used to be said, at least in some parts of the country like Eastern India, that wages are for attendance, work is for overtime. We have come a long way from that. I think all over the country there is a gradually strengthening work culture. This will grow stronger in the 90s. It depends on managements, what kind of culture they demonstrate. And as we improve the work culture, people will also demand quality of work life in return for the value added, for the productivity that they are giving to the enterprise. But here, there is a very dangerous disease creeping into executives and management, unfortunately, in a number of companies, and in the 90s, we will have to find a cure for this. The parallel disease that is creeping up is salaries and benefits are for attendance. I think appraisal systems will have to very bluntly state and face 3 points, that there will be clearly set goals and work plans for each executive, and he will have to earn his annual costs by adding value, by achieving those goals. That is to stay where he is, not for promotions. Second, at the end of the year, even if a number of people claim that they have achieved the respective goals, appraisal will still be relative to a population, relative to those 10 executives, 20 executives. Ratings cannot be on absolute goal achievement but on relative goal achievement. And third, promotion will not be based upon past performance only, it will have to be based upon an assessment of potential. We have had, as Gunnar Medal said, too soft a culture, too soft a national culture, too soft an organizational culture. Our people will ask for quality of life, which has several dimensions. Safety of the product, safety of the environment, safety of people at work, the availability of the husband or the wife in the family, to look after the children, and blending work life and organizational life, and leaving behind in the 21st century for our successors an ecology and an environment which still leaves some hope for them. We are damaging it at a high rate, and we are doing it with short-sightedness. What is the answer to this? The answer is that many of our managements must rise to this technological challenge of finding solutions. We cannot take the view that our job is to exploit resources and make profits and let government or somebody else take care. Having laid out these 5 major challenges, and if I may briefly recapitulate them: more internationalization, more spread of literacy and information and therefore assertive movements, growing per capita income and market potential, increasing domestic competition, and greater expectations of business from society.